In this second of a short series, we're speaking to two active partnership directors to see how active partnerships have reacted and supported the sector in their addressing of this massive problem around activity and also keeping clubs going. Firstly, we speak to Paul Brivio, who is Director of Active Oxfordshire, and to look at how they're addressing inactivity and also supporting the sector. Paul, thanks for coming on and having a chat. Quickly, who are you?
Good question. Paul Brivio here, Chief Exec at Active Oxfordshire, one of the 43 ex-county sports partnerships, but now active partnerships. So been in post for about 18 months now, or thought I'd seen it all, and this thing happened. So interesting times. So
when it first happened, what was your first sort of thoughts and actions?
Well, it was to get sanitizer in our toilets, actually, which I was told to do by our tenants. I guess, like a lot of people, you know, took it a little bit casually, I think, at first. But we moved quite quickly when I think it dawned on us that this is going to have a big impact. So one of the first actions was to start remote working, get the team into safe places, and then I think to look at where we had strong relationships, which we needed to keep going. So we work very much in the third sector, charitable sector space. So we were hearing from them about, you know, some distress calls quite early doors. So I think that was an immediate response, was how do we keep what we want to do going in terms of our agenda, but realizing very quickly that a lot of the activities, the interventions, things like school games that we help make happen, we're going to stop really quickly. So it was quite a, you know, sudden impact, really. And I guess, like most people, we thought, well, this is here for 4 or 6 weeks, then the mist will lift, and then we're back on it. So I think the second shock to the system was this is going to last for a long time, and it's going to really shape the way we work and think for the future.
What do you think that impact's going to be?
The impact? Well, I think the impact will be on the most vulnerable and needy in our society, which is, you know, the issue in Oxfordshire is about inequalities. You know, we've got an incredibly creative, active, energetic county, but we've got some major inequality issues. So, you know, we've now realised who our real key workers are, haven't we? And they're the people in Oxfordshire who often have 2 or 3 jobs. They're running around. The kids can't swim. They can't cycle. They're in employment, but they're poor and they're frazzled. And of course, the whole sector now is under, you know, a lot of distress. So I think the impact's going to be huge. I'm hoping that our active county will pick itself up and be pretty resilient. But even there's going to be long-term impact.
So you probably see that actually the inequalities that were there already are probably just going to be amplified in a way.
Oh, they'll be widened, definitely. And it will bring some other groups into our vision. We've been working with Age UK, for example, for the last 6 months. But actually, that whole area of people who quite like to be trapped at home, you know, I'm almost in that category myself. Not like you, young and promising, Simon. You know, coming out of our houses is going to be a real challenge. And
I think it's going to be a fear there of just leaving the house.
Totally. We do a lot of work with diabetic people. I'm a diabetic as well. So again, you know, our whole thing there was to get people together in surgeries and promote physical activity. We won't be able to do that either. So these are groups who are not always brilliant online or adept at social media. So some of it's going to be going back to basics, getting on the phone and talking to people. So I do think the inequalities will widen, and you know, to be fair to local authorities, they're going to take a hell of a beating, you know, in terms of their budgets, their facilities. You know, in Oxfordshire, you know, most councils will be paid by contractors to run facilities, so that's going to have a huge impact on budgets. So it's a real concern, I think.
I think the leisure contract side of things is going to be, you know, if a leisure operator goes bust, it refers back to the local authority, and I think budgets are going to be a nightmare, and how we deal with social distancing and events and things like that. So what's the Paul Brivio future looking like then? What's the vision for sport and physical activity look like, whether it's nationally or in Oxfordshire? What does it look like in the autumn of this year and maybe into next year?
Well, I should start by saying I'm still an optimist. They say a pessimist is an optimist with experience, don't they?
Oh yeah,
but no, I think there's a lot of good going to come out of this crisis, and I think we've all been through our own personal disasters and experiences. If we learn from this, there can be a lot of good come out of it, and particularly the way the social, the voluntary community, third sectors have come together.
Yeah,
an organisation called Oxfordshire all in with 500 organisations now who are mobilising people. So there's a huge amount of energy to be channeled. But I think the impact will be that we've got to provide more support to a sector we thought was strong and resilient, i.e. the sports sector.
Yeah.
But we now realise what they provide to our lives. We've got the Chief Medical Officer standing up and saying exercise is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, it's an advert every day. It's brilliant, isn't it?
Incredible. So we've got to channel those energies and make sure that we change some of the systems and behaviours that we know just lock us down and make us work in the way we do. But to think it's going to be a flick of a switch, I think is not realistic. And I think there's a lot of damage being done. There's loads of deaths and tragedies going on around us, which make putting sport and physical activity. It puts it into perspective, really, but we know sport and physical activity can play such a big role in regenerating our society. Economic development will be key, I think. There'll be loads more people out of work, won't there? Loads more people on zero-based contracts. So we've got to find a way of helping people. And it's like the creative arts, sport, physical activity has got so much to offer, so much to offer.
I think the entrepreneurs will bubble to the top as well. I think we've had that much of a workforce that's self-employed and has built their own businesses. I think although they're suffering now when we're on lockdown, I think they'll be entrepreneurial enough to generate stuff, whether it's in the fitness industry or in coaching or volunteering. I think that will. I think the entrepreneurial spirit will come through. But
there's loads of innovation, isn't there? Everybody's seeing it's in action, but we're doing things differently already as an organisation, which we can embed in the system. So there's going to be things that we can really learn from. Now, our sector isn't very good at learning, is it? It's got no sense of history or perspective. But there's some good leadership being provided by Sport England, I think.
I agree, absolutely. They've really stepped up, haven't they?
Yeah. I'm really disappointed in some of the governing bodies like cycling and swimming, I have to say, because just when we need their infrastructure most, they're being furloughed. And come on, these are big sports, and they're getting good money from spoiling. And I'm not saying it's easy, but actually that's a big omission, I think, and we'll pay for that lack of infrastructure, knowledge, capacity when we really need it most. Because I think our challenge is to hold the space for the future, not to help put our shoulder to the wheel with our colleagues now, but we've got to hold the space so that we're ready to re-energise, reactivate.
So you may be seeing that voluntary sector, in some cases, is quite fragile. That might fall apart or not be as strong as it was before.
Yeah, I think we work closely with a number of youth, charitable organisations, and they are furloughing staff, and they haven't got reserves beyond the 3 months period, for example. We're really lucky that Sport England have been so supportive. We're not furloughing any staff, we've got reserves. So it's really vital that, it's not just the sporting sector we look at, but it is all this, the charitable sector who provide a lot of physical activity and sporting opportunities now. So it's a real mixed economy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm worried that some of the key players won't survive this.
Secondly, we talked to Sadie Mason, my old friend, who is director at Active Sussex, and see how she's getting to the people that maybe sport doesn't necessarily get through its governing body structures.
I'm Chief Executive of Active Sussex, which covers East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove, so quite a large partnership.
Real.
And we were closed down actually on the 17th of March because we're based at the University of Brighton. So most of our staff from that date have been working from home.
Has that caused any problems with you, or has it just been fairly natural?
Only operationally, in terms of making a few adjustments to our financial payments, because our finance officer only works 2 days a week, and so our authorisations are desk-based, but we found a way around that. We had a contingency plan in place, so all good. We pretty much had a business interruption plan, regardless of COVID-19, which meant that all staff would work remotely. So we pretty much had contingencies.
So say something like the offices have been burnt down or something like that.
Yes, yeah. If the university had to close for any reason, then we pretty much had that sorted. The only things that we didn't sort straight away, of course, was because we weren't sure, is what would happen with staff salaries.
Right.
But pretty much within a few weeks, the government introduced a furlough scheme, coronavirus job retention scheme. But then, of course, Sport England subsequently said that active partnerships would remain funded, and in fact they extended our funding for a further year. So that was pretty good for us. It meant we could focus on things going forward. Just small tweaks, allowing people with kids to be working a little bit more flexibly. So it does cause a lot of stress for some of those. 60% of our staff do have children, pretty much all of them under 4. And of course myself, obviously, with one of mine at college, but with special needs, so still caring responsibilities. And I think people in general are always conscientious about doing their hours. And what I've said to my staff is that, look, you've already got a second job, having to look after your child. We don't expect you to work a further 8 hours on top of that. So basically we've given them a bandwidth of working between 7:30 and 7:30.
Right.
How they manage their time. If they do 4 hours with the kids and 4 hours for us, it doesn't matter, because we actually think it's their mental well-being that matters the most. And of those, the 40% that don't have family, they're working at home on their own. Some have partners, some don't. So we've got to be very careful that we're ensuring that they're balancing their time properly. And
it's completely two ends of the spectrum. There's those that have got absolutely nothing around them, and those have got potentially chaos around them as well.
Correct.
Somewhere in between that most people are. But I think that health and well-being, I think people have looked at protecting the business, haven't also looked at the health and well-being of staff.
I would pretty much say that from our perspective, our trustees were more concerned about the staff, because they knew the business would operate regardless. Because we had a lot of planning that we could do. We're coming up to audit time, we're coming up to annual reporting time, so there's a lot of time that can be spent reflecting, reporting and planning forward, as well as finding out what the rest of the sector are doing. So one of the first things we did was email all our partners within our network to find out what they were doing. And we were pretty much getting lots of out of offices where people were furloughed. That was quite helpful, because it means you're not sending out insensitive information to people, or treading on toes or whatever.
So what about engaging, because obviously the emergency funds come out and all that sort of thing, so there's engaging with the sort of governing body affiliated groups, which appear to be well sorted with the governing bodies, and the bigger governing bodies have really got to their clubs, I think, quite effectively. But then there's the others that you might have funded, that are maybe faith groups or just activity groups, or addressing inequality. How have you got to those?
We continue with our newsletters. We've got some tailored newsletters similar to what Sport Structures send out. We've got one for a disability network and all the organisations that support them, so Disability Sport and Mental Health Network. We've got our schools, so primary and secondary schools network. We've got our Active Sussex network, which is quite wide, so that covers our community voluntary sector partners. And we have a couple of forums that exist as well, so strategic forums, one for East Sussex, one for Brighton and Hove, and one for East Sussex, and that spans sport and physical activity. So we have public health colleagues involved with that. And we've literally, just in response to the government call for evidence, it's the DCMS call for evidence. I know it was early April, but it's taken a few weeks, months really, I think, for people to really see what the impact has been, the short-term impact. So we're using things like Teams and WebEx to get people together so we can actually discuss and just get some feedback from them as to what the impact has been, so we can then feed that back into the DCMS call for evidence.
So have you had to develop new networks, or have you got those informal networks in place already?
We've got them in place. No,
yeah.
We've not had to develop any. And where we haven't been able to reach any particular partners, we've gone through partners that we know that can reach them. Like, for example, we don't know all the people that are in the Active Hastings partnership, but we do know Hastings Voluntary Action very well.
Right.
And the Active Hastings leads, we go to their meetings, so they can get information out quite quickly to them, and we can get information back. So it works quite well.
So in terms of the governing bodies, and the governing body clubs appear to have closed down or dealt with stuff pretty well. And I think perception of the community groups is that they've closed down because they haven't necessarily had a lot to close down. Is that and has that happened, do you think, with those local community non-affiliated groups?
I can tell you what's happened with some that are offering or used to offer direct care and respite, for example. That's totally stopped because of social distancing. So that has moved to either, well, it's either stop, full stop, or there's a small amount of online support networks and stuff. I can give an example with Brighton and Hove Table Tennis Club. Now, they operate not exclusively for refugees and underprivileged people, but a vast majority of their club is from that, what they're called LSEG.
Yeah.
And they stopped operating, but they've totally moved to keep everybody connected to Zoom. So their club operates on Zoom, you know, so they're doing virtual table tennis challenges on Zoom, and they're making sure the kids with Down syndrome are well. You know, they've got 2 qualified coaches with Down syndrome, and they're leading sessions. So they've just gone about it differently. Most of the premises that they're in, they don't have to pay rent on because they've managed to get them either for free.
So the costs are not, there's no cost there.
The impact hasn't been so bad. But I would say that other clubs where they have to rent facilities, you know, they've got in quite quickly, I suppose, with the Community Emergency Fund. But there are other smaller groups who either don't have the capacity to apply, or actually, by the time they've got around to applying, the fund will probably close. So they don't bother.
And they're probably going to, 300 or 400 quid would make a big difference to them, or would just cover off the costs, or?
Yeah, I think it probably would make a difference. But as I say, a lot of them are not coming forward. So we're hoping from the forum that we're going to have in just 10 days' time that we'll find any issues that are there locally and see if we can help address them, you know, as far as we can, to be honest.
In a few months or a year's time, what do you think sport and physical activity looks like? Is it going to be, you know, obviously, you know, as and when social distancing is dealt with in some way, shape or form?
I missed the first bit of your question, but did you say?
Sorry, what does it look like in, you know, a few months' time or years' time?
It's interesting because I was wondering about this join the movement where everybody's exercising indoors and people seem to be out taking their 1 hour's walk. Well, I go out absolutely every morning religiously. I don't see that many people. Now, that could be because it's too early, or they really are exercising indoors. So in a year's time, I'm wondering if we will manage to capitalise on the fact that people see the value of being more active to their mental health, and whether or not actually we still encourage them to be active in their homes because that's where they're comfortable.
Sure.
I actually feel that they're not automatically going to go out the house and go and do group activity. If they've been comfortable being active at home and they've seen the benefits, then I actually feel some sort of online support or an app or whatever they've been comfortable using, if they've changed their behaviour and they can see it makes a difference, then I guess it's a matter of us understanding that and getting them to talk about it and ask them to be advocates on our behalf to speak to that community that clearly wasn't active before. So in a year's time, it would be nice to see that figures for the inactive population have been maintained, because over the last few weeks activity has gone up. And it would be nice to see that that was maintained. I don't feel that in a year's time football stadiums will be half empty. I think we'll go exactly back to how we were, because maybe in a year's time an antidote or a vaccine will be available anyway. But I would like to think that people have changed their behaviour and attitudes towards physical activity and the value of it. So that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, and it might be that, you know, they're talking about flexible working hours and things like that. It might be that people fit in their exercise before they go into work at 11 o'clock or stuff like that. So I think there's some real opportunities there. Yeah. And what about your network? And are you seeing any things that will fall apart, or are you seeing it just coming back again with maybe a little bit of change?
I don't know. I'd be interested to see how the schools respond, because we had to cancel both of our school games. We had 4 separate events and the major event. Be interesting to see, because we then went to virtual school games. Again, it's behaviour change. 6,000 children signed up, right. Which is more than what we would have had at the actual games. We only have 1,000, so there is demand. So again, it'll be interesting to see if we adopt some of that and do a virtual school games as well as a physical one that could be, you know, just a showcase event and just show to young children, young people that you can be just as active and represent your school at home as you do on the pitch.
Yeah,
that would be
I think that could be quite exciting actually.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that the change in working hours and practices ought to be adopted. I've always been one for flexible working, and I think our industry has always been relatively flexible.
Yeah, I agree.
But there are still some that are embedded within local government and they work to those rigid times, and it really isn't good. They need to be changing that.